It's 5 o'clock in London. Hello and welcome to Newsday from the BBC World Service with Alan Kasuja.
Stay at home. Great Britain is now under a lockdown. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced a new string of measures aimed at curbing the spread of coronavirus.
But is it too little, too late? Experts predict the hospital system could soon be overwhelmed.
We really have got to mobilise the community because the NHS will not be able to cope, and many people are going to have to be nursed at home, and many people will die at home.
And with many countries around the world closing their borders, is there still room for international cooperation in the fight against COVID-19? These and other stories, including the latest in sports and business, after this news bulletin.
Hello, I'm Neil Nunes with the BBC News. In the latest White House briefing on America's coronavirus response, President Trump has said he expects the country to reopen for business in weeks rather than months. Mr. Trump said he thought more people would die from a prolonged shutdown than as a result of the virus.
America will again and soon be open for business. Very soon. A lot sooner than 3 or 4 months that somebody was suggesting. A lot sooner. We cannot let the cure be worse than the problem itself. We're not going to let the cure be worse than the problem.
Health experts have warned that unless Americans continue to limit their social interactions, the number of infections will overwhelm the healthcare system. Britain has put in place severe restrictions on daily life to try to slow the spread of the coronavirus. In a broadcast to the nation, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson ordered the immediate closure of all shops selling non-essential items. He said people should only leave their homes to buy basic necessities, for medical help, to care for the vulnerable, or for one period of exercise a day. China has reported a new case of coronavirus in Wuhan, ending a 5-day run of no new cases in the city where the global outbreak began. Official government figures say there have been almost 80 new cases reported on the Chinese mainland in the last 24 hours. Here's Robin Brown.
For almost a week, Wuhan had no new cases reported, but that has now ended. Just. One new case was confirmed in the city. It comes after health officials there confirmed that they were not counting people who were positive but weren't hospitalized or didn't show any symptoms of the disease. China's main concern, though, now is imported cases coming from abroad. Most are believed to be Chinese nationals coming home, although a British family of 3 who arrived in Shanghai are among the latest cases.
Australia's states have imposed movement restrictions to try and slow the spread of coronavirus. Those entering South Australia, Western Australia and the Northern Territory are asked to self-isolate for 2 weeks. All non-essential services, including gyms, pubs and places of worship, have been shut down across the country. Soldiers deployed in the Spanish capital Madrid to help fight the coronavirus pandemic have found elderly patients abandoned and sometimes dead from the disease at retirement homes. An investigation's been launched. On Monday, Spain reported more than 460 deaths, most of them in Madrid. The crisis has forced the health authorities to open an ice rink to store the victims' bodies. World News from the BBC. New Zealand and the United States have joined Britain, Canada and Australia in supporting the postponement of the 2020 Tokyo Olympics amid the coronavirus pandemic. In a statement, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee said delaying the Games would be the most promising decision and that an overwhelming majority of American athletes backed the move. Residents of several shanty towns in the Brazilian city of Rio de Janeiro say they've received social media messages from local crime gangs ordering an overnight curfew to limit the spread of the coronavirus. People living in 3 communities in the west of the city said local drug traffickers and militias had sent the message. In other news, the U.S. government says it'll cut aid to Afghanistan by $1 billion this year. Washington said it would review its cooperation with Kabul following a meeting between the U.S. Secretary of State and Afghan leaders. Here's Barbara Pletasha.
Mr. Pompeo's statement was unusually harsh. He denounced President Ashraf Ghani and his rival Abdullah for being unable to work together. He said they were acting inconsistently with commitments made in connection with the peace agreement and that their failure posed a direct threat to U.S. national interests. He later told reporters that he hoped the two men would get their act together and the U.S. wouldn't have to slash $1 billion in aid, but that it was prepared to do so and to cut another $1 billion next year.
Scientists based at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington have identified a primordial creature, which they say was the forerunner to most animals living today, including people. The ancient fossil of a worm-like organism was discovered in the Australian outback. Icaria waterutia was smaller than a grain of rice and burrowed on the sea floor to eat dead organic matter. BBC World News.
Thank you, Neil, for that. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Newsday. Alan Kasucha and James Cocknell with you today. The BBC World Service bringing you the top stories from around the world, and there's none bigger than the coronavirus pandemic right now. Our programme times have changed as a consequence. We're on now for the next 2.5 hours, ending at 7:30 GMT.
Let me give you a few of the main coronavirus headlines. 350,000 confirmed cases worldwide, with nearly 15,000 deaths and almost 100,000 people recovering. The coronavirus pandemic is accelerating. That's according to the World Health Organization. Italy's deaths dropped for a second day in a row as it enters tougher lockdown.
And this half hour, we'll look at the United Kingdom and Russia and get some insight into what the pandemic could mean for the African continent too. Remember, you can send a text or WhatsApp message on anything you hear. Our number is +44 77 86 20 50 85.
The United Kingdom's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced that the country will now go into a lockdown under strict regulations, only allowed out in certain circumstances, such as to get food or medical supplies or do essential work. This comes as people failed to comply with the advice about social distancing over the weekend, as pictures of large numbers of people gathered in parks and in markets emerged, despite the government's warning about social distancing. This is part of what the Prime Minister had to say.
You must stay at home, because the critical thing we must do to stop the disease spreading between households. That is why people will only be allowed to leave their home for the following very limited purposes. Shopping for basic necessities as infrequently as possible. One form of exercise a day, for example, a run, walk or cycle, alone or with members of your household. Any medical need to provide care or to help a vulnerable person, and travelling to and from work, but only where this is absolutely necessary and cannot be done from home. That's all.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Professor John Ashton is a former regional director of public health, and this is what he had to say regarding the announcement.
We must all welcome these measures now and get behind them. We have lost 7 weeks. They should have taken place before now, and the epidemic is accelerating. But we must welcome the measures now and get behind them and make them stick. What we also now must do, though, is to protect the frontline health workers who are at risk. And the Director General of WHO said today that we cannot have an effective response unless the workers are protected. They need protective gear and they need regular testing themselves. And the testing regime has got to be put in place. So those two things are very important. The third thing is, though, that because of the numbers of cases that are going to come through, the number of deaths that we're going to see over the next couple of weeks, we really have got to mobilise the community, because the NHS will not be able to cope, and many people are going to have to be nursed at home, and many people will die at home. And what we really need to do is to support the community groups that have risen up around the country to develop their nursing skills using online platforms like the Open University and so on, to support the development of basic basic nursing skills in the community, because a lot of this is going to have to be picked up at home, in towns and villages across the country, because there will not be the capacity in the NHS. And actually, because of the lack of protection of staff in the hospitals and the lack of testing, the hospitals now are in danger of becoming part of the epidemic. They're in danger of becoming contaminated.
Professor John Ashton, a former regional director of public health.
Mentioned the World Health Organization head, that's the Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, and he says the coronavirus pandemic is accelerating. Here's a direct quote. It took 67 days from the first reported case to reach 100,000 cases, 11 days for the second 100,000 cases, and just 4 days for the third 100,000 cases.
So how can we deal with a global pandemic, and how can the developed world coordinate with developing nations, which might have fewer resources to cope?
Gail Smith worked as an advisor to the US President Barack Obama during the 2014 Ebola crisis and has served as the head of USAID, the US's development agency. She now runs the One campaign. When I spoke to her a few minutes ago, she started by giving her reaction to President Trump's latest comments. He says he thinks more people would die from a prolonged shutdown than as a result of the virus.
If I've learned anything in working on pandemics and global health, it's that your best bet is to listen to the scientists and medical professionals, because they're the ones that have the knowledge and the facts that are needed to calculate what the best strategies are. So my default has been for some time to listen to Dr. Fauci and others. I think the role of politicians and elected officials is to make decisions and move swiftly, and when this is all over, they'll be judged on that. But for now, my advice to everyone is listen to the scientists and the medical professionals, because they know the most about what's going on and I think have the greatest insights into what the best options are.
What specifically, to your mind, needs to be done? What should countries around the world be doing more of, and perhaps what should they be doing less of too?
Well, I think the first thing is just collaboration at all levels. Again, I think it's working very effectively among scientists and health professionals who have a long history and practice of sharing data between and amongst themselves. I'd like to see much more international political collaboration. And I think with respect to those parts of the world, and in particular low-income countries, there's a real need for other countries to be paying attention on three levels. The first is there's going to need to be support for the response. Now, we have seen the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation stand up. Jack Ma and his new foundation just delivered over 1 million testing kits and other supplies to Africa. In the deliberations here in Washington, there is some funding included in these supplemental budget bills for international response. It's not enough, but it's a good start. The second is, we're having lots of discussions about the impact of this pandemic on the global economy. The global economy also includes Africa, and I think the impact there is going to be massive. So I think those conversations need to indeed be about the global economy and not just Europe and North America. And then the third thing, and this is a hard one, but it's in many ways the most important, is if you think about managing a pandemic, we need a net all the way around the world to do that. And there are a lot of holes in the net. There are a lot of countries that don't have the capacity to prevent, detect, and respond to global health threats, particularly viruses. We know where the gaps are, and I think investing in something that's called global health security, building up the capacity of all countries, and countries should invest their own resources, but I think many need to be supplemented, building the capacity of those countries to fight effectively, because we're going to see more viruses in the future. So that's the long game. And, the tendency of the world is sometimes to play the short game. I think in this case, I hope we're going to learn the lesson that we need to play the long game.
Gail Smith.
You're listening to Newsday. Alan and James with you. In a few minutes, we'll speak to a young woman here in the UK who will tell us why people living on the poverty line like coping with the unprecedented challenges of the coronavirus. And a quick reminder, we have an update in about 15 minutes of the latest news. President Trump has declared the United States will be open for business again in a matter of weeks rather than months. Britain has brought in the most stringent social restrictions in living memory as part of its campaign to contain the coronavirus. And a new case of coronavirus in Wuhan has ended a round of 5 days with no new cases in the Chinese city where the global outbreak began.
Let's get to sports news now with Alistair Ross.
And the big news is that I can't tell you the big news yet. We are 1 hour away from learning who has won the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year award. We have had the most votes ever this year. And either Lucy Bronze, Julie Ertz, Sam Kerr, Vivian Miedema or Megan Rapinoe will be crowned the best footballer in the world as voted by you. So stay tuned. 2 high-profile Nigerian footballers have been kidnapped. Enyimba's Dayo Ojo and Abiy Comet's Benjamin Oluomade were captured while on Nigeria's Benin-Owo Expressway. Enyimba's Emmanuel James was also in the car, but he managed to escape. European football's governing body are looking at the possibility of concluding the Champions League and Europa League with mini-tournaments for the remaining teams. The men's and women's finals have been formally postponed. And Canada's Andre de Grasse says he's hoping to take part in a postponed Olympics. The sprinter took a national record of 3 medals home from the 2016 Games in Rio. He's been reacting to Canada's decision to withdraw their athletes from the Games. Australia has also said it wouldn't send its athletes if the Games stay in July as scheduled.
And thank you very much, Alistair. Alistair's going to return in about, 26 minutes with more sports? Stay with us if you can.
I'll say about 25 minutes first.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, let's get some business news now. Andrew Wood manning our business desk in Hong Kong, but we can talk America. Politicians in Washington still wrangling over the details of the latest stimulus package, $1.6 trillion, something like that. How's that delay affecting the stock markets, Andrew?
Well, actually, stock markets here in Asia seem to be quite buoyant today. I think there's a feeling that this stimulus package, it may take an extra day or two of wrangling between the Democrats and the Republicans before the Senate can pass this package. That they're feeling that, well, you know, it's going to get passed, and that is going to help. Now, interestingly, markets here, I think the Hang Seng Index is up by about 3.75% at the moment. Similar rises in Tokyo as well, so they seem to be taking it in their stride. I have to say that normally if shares were up by 3 or 4% in a day, in normal times we'd be going, wow, that's amazing, that's incredible. But it is a sign of the volatility at the moment that the only time you get lots and lots of sudden rises in share prices is also when you get all these sudden downturns as well. I mean, 3 or 4% is not really going to make up for the falls of 20, 30% and so on that we've seen in share markets over the past month or so, since basically middle of February. Now, if the stimulus package goes ahead, one of the things that I think a lot of investors are looking forward to, and businesses, is that they will probably end up getting some checks to help them through the crisis. Now, the American government has done this before. I think in 2001 and in 2008, it sent these checks out, but they took an awful long time to arrive. And Jeffrey Schultz, he's an investment strategist at Clearbridge Investments in New York. He says that this time, if the Americans are going to, for these checks to have any effect, then it's got to do better than it did back in 2001 and 2009. It's got to be quicker, or else small businesses are going to suffer.
It took about 3.5 months to get checks into individuals' hands during those packages. 3.5 months is an eternity in this type of environment where you have zero revenues as a small business owner. But given how quickly Congress has come together with this package, I'm hoping that it's going to be something in the tune of a couple of weeks to a month. But anything outside of that window, I think you're still going to see stress. You're going to see continued layoffs, and these businesses not be available when we come out the other side of this downturn.
That was Jeffrey Schultz, and before that, Andrew Wood. You're listening to Newsday on the BBC World Service.
You're listening listening to Newsday on the BBC now. Russia's COVID record shows relatively low numbers, less than 500 confirmed cases, and that is thanks perhaps to the early precautions that were put in place, although plenty believe that the real numbers are much higher. 60% of all known cases are in Moscow, and on Monday morning, Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin called on elderly people and people with chronic conditions in Moscow to stay inside until the 14th of April, offering both these categories single payouts of about $50 as compensation. Now, Sergei Goryasko is our correspondent in Moscow. Good to have you on, Sergei. What more can you tell us about the situation in Moscow? Are you working from home yet?
Thank you for having me. Well, for now, I'm really working from home because it's pretty early, but actually, I'm planning to go to the office still. There is no quarantine in the country, and people are encouraged to stay home if they can and to work from home if it's possible, but it's not mandatory yet. But yesterday, it happened with people older than 65. The mayor, as you already mentioned, told them that they should stay home as to self-isolate as a precaution against the spread of the coronavirus and against them getting disease, because this is a category which is the highest risk.
Okay, what about the numbers? I just read there that some people say that the numbers coming out of Russia might be lower than the real figures. What are you hearing?
Well, it's arguably true that the government authorities are not trying to hide anything for now, because I'm pretty sure that they are having still the same numbers which they are given to the public. The thing is that probably they haven't done enough tests, and which is why the number of people diseased is growing exponentially every day. So the more tests they will be doing, the more people diseased will hear about.
Okay, so how are the tests being conducted? Tell me about the process. We've had that you call certain numbers in certain countries, someone comes out to you, or, what's the process like in Russia?
That's the best question for this, because actually nobody knows exactly. We got St. Petersburg, the second biggest city in Russia, where the tests are conducted for everybody who wants that. So they can just walk into the hospital and ask to be tested for coronavirus, and it will be done in a couple of days. In 10 days, they'll tell you if you have it or not. But as for Moscow, only people who get to with some conditions are taken to the hospitals. Only they are tested and they are isolated there. And we don't know even where the exact process of testing is happening. Either they take their blood and their biological material in Moscow and they take it to Novosibirsk, where there is in the center of Siberia, where there's a laboratory working on that. Either they do that in Moscow. So
how far is that city?
It's pretty far. It's like about a 4 hours.
Right. And do we know anything about what's happening in the provinces and the rest of the country?
We know that the figures of people diseased is relatively small there, because obviously for the first place, not many people from the province travel abroad where they could catch this virus. But we are not quite sure about what's happening at the border with China.
And briefly, the 22nd of April, there is an voting on constitutional changes. Will that still go ahead, do you know?
Well, as our sources tell us, people working in Kremlin are really trying to persuade each other to postpone this voting, this sort of election.
Right.
And they are explaining that it could be difficult, could spread the virus more, it could be even dangerous. But Putin hasn't decided yet what to do.
Sergei Goryasko, our colleague in Moscow, thank you very much.
And we come back to our top story. The United Kingdom is now in a shutdown with people's movement restricted to the bare necessities. You can go out to get food or medical supplies, essential work, a bit of exercise, but no gatherings of more than 2 people are allowed unless it's your family. Really tough measures then. So if you are already surviving on very low income, living in social housing, living a small room for your entire family, maybe without access to the internet, how are you going to cope with the social distancing, the social isolation measures being taken to slow the spread of the coronavirus? A short while before the government introduced these tough new steps, I was speaking to Charlene Beck, who's 33 and lives in North London with her partner and a daughter who's nearly 2.
I live in a temporary accommodation in Belsize Park. It's one room and it's very hard to social distance because it's like a building, so you're constantly walking past someone if you come out your room, just even to get a little bit of fresh air outside. So it's kind of difficult.
So you're constantly bumping into people and maybe worried about that as well?
Yeah, exactly. If I have to go downstairs or I have to go in a lift and someone gets in the lift, it's kind of hard because I'm on second floor, so it's really difficult. And then even if you're coming downstairs, because the stairs are quite small, like you're walking past someone, you're not at a distance, you're actually walking past someone.
And you said you live in just one room.
Yes.
How many of you are in that room?
There's 3 of us, me, my partner, and my daughter. And there's other families in there which are larger. Some of them got more kids.
So that's lots of people in a really small space, I guess?
Yeah, very small space. There is, I think, a couple here that have, I think, 4 children, 4 girls. And it's one room, so I can't even imagine what space they have because it's tiny. Once you have your bed here, and then you have your kitchen. It's not even like a kitchen, it's small but work surfaces, so it's really, really small.
And lots of people in the UK, elsewhere in the world too, have been stocking up on food and supplies and so on because they're worried about a lockdown or things running out. If, as might be the case for quite a few people in your block, people are living on not that much income, it must be, again, very hard to get all the supplies you might think you need.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people here are on benefits, which ain't a lot.
$400 or $500, yeah.
When this all come out that people are stockpiling, there's some people that couldn't go out and get anything because they weren't getting paid till the week after. So then when they went out to get something, there was nothing left. Even when I went out to get some rice, there was nothing there at all. So it was really, really difficult. So there's people in here that still need it and stuff, but they can't get it because it's not in the shops. And the corner stores are charging extra for nappies or baby milk, and people can't afford it.
And quite a lot of people are ordering shops online, getting their shopping delivered, but I guess not everybody has internet on their phone.
No, exactly. Some people don't have phones, some people don't have data because they can't afford it in here. It's really, really, really difficult.
And schools are being closed now, so people are having to think about maybe educating their kids. Again, if you haven't got access to the internet, you're not going to be doing online lessons or anything like that. Do you think the government, the council, the authorities are doing enough to help people in your situation?
I don't think they're doing enough now. I think they can do a little bit more, knowing that we are financially struggling. I think the building should be cleaner because there is vulnerable people in here. There's young people with a baby, older people, elderly people that have to stay in their room. I think it would be good to check on people in the building to make sure everybody's okay because of their mental state. I get people have to stay home, but sometimes it's not good for someone to stay home if they haven't got anybody else. And more support, if we got some more support, then I think everyone would be okay.
That's Charlene Buck, a 33-year-old living in North London, talking about some of the difficulties of being poor in the time of the coronavirus, a picture perhaps replicated in other parts of the world. We've got some other headlines, global news stories. Mexico has 367 confirmed cases of the country, up from 316 the day before. Cuba has ordered all remaining foreign travellers to go into self-isolation in hotels as it closes its borders. Plenty of countries clearly very concerned about the coronavirus. All the latest here on Newsday.
This is the BBC World Service. Now take a moment to listen to this. Commitment.
I think every one of them knew this was going to be an incredible achievement for humankind.
And determination.
We have to allow the victims to understand that this route is not a good route.
Feelings
feelings of unease.
I was not comfortable to go to the street because some people, they were looking at me as if I'm a sinful person
or lost.
This building represented my life. It meant everything to me.
The human experience.
The bandit has always been in the imagination of the Mexican people.
They came to hear the music, but they experienced a whole other thing.
It's always an enrichment when two cultures come together.
Documentaries on the BBC World Service.
She looked down at the phone and looked back up at me and mouthed the words, Musharraf.
To listen, go to bbcworldservice.com/documentaries.
To Newsday, Alan Kasuja and James Cobnell with you from the BBC World Service.
We'll get an overview of coronavirus on the African continent and zoom in on South Africa.
We'll hear why one activist believes more prisoners should be released in the United States to stop the spread of the disease.
Plus, the artists holding an online social distancing festival to keep our spirits up. Those and other stories after this news update.
BBC News with Neil Nunes. President Trump says he believes more people could die from a prolonged shutdown than as a result of the coronavirus. He said he expected coronavirus containment measures will only be in place in the United States for a matter of weeks and not months. Britain's government has ordered people to stay indoors for at least the next 3 weeks. People will only be able to leave their homes to shop for basic necessities. As in Germany, gatherings of more than 2 people outside the home are now forbidden. China has reported a new case of coronavirus in Wuhan. It ends a 5-day run of no new cases in the city where the global outbreak began. Australia's states have tightened movement restrictions to slow the spread of coronavirus. Those entering South Australia, Western Australia, and the Northern Territory are asked to self-isolate for 2 weeks. Myanmar has reported its first confirmed cases of coronavirus infections. However, health experts fear the real number of infections may be concealed by the lack of testing capability. New Zealand and the United States have joined Britain, Canada, and Australia in supporting the postponement of the 2020 Tokyo Summer Olympics amid the coronavirus pandemic. A man's died in the American state of Arizona, and his wife is in critical condition after they ingested chloroquine phosphate, which is used to clean fish tanks. Chloroquine is one of the ingredients in an anti-malarial drug combination, which President Trump has described as a gift from God that could treat COVID-19. In other news, the U.S. government says it'll cut aid to Afghanistan by $1 billion this year. Washington said it would review its cooperation with Kabul after the Afghan President Ashraf Ghani and his rival Abdullah failed to reconcile their differences. BBC News.
Thank you very much for that news. Hello, welcome. This is Newsday from the BBC World Service with Alan Kasuja and James Cobnell. Coming up this half hour, as coronavirus spreads, we'll take you to Congo, Brazzaville and South Africa and find out why some believe more prisoners in the United States should be released to stop the spread of the disease. And we'll bring you a little light relief too, an online social distancing festival where artists from around the world hope to spread a little joy.
Rapidly accelerating. That's according to the World Health Organization head, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus. He points out that there are more than 300,000 confirmed cases worldwide and the rate of infection is increasing rapidly. But he stresses that it's still possible to change the trajectory of the outbreak. The hotspots include parts of Europe and Asia and also the US.
The spread of the disease is accelerating also in Africa, with the countermeasures also being put in place. Now, for example, today Senegal will bring in a curfew. Ivory Coast has declared a state of emergency, and South Africa's lockdown begins on Thursday.
We'll hear from South Africa in a few minutes, but first we're joined from Brazzaville in the Republic of Congo by Dr. Michel Yao, Program Manager for Emergency Response for World Health Organization Africa. Thanks very much for speaking to Newsday. I want to talk in broader terms a little while later, but I wonder if you could perhaps start by telling us a little bit about the situation in Brazzaville.
The situation in Brazzaville as a country is also of concern. Of course, we still having cases after the importation of the first case, and now it's how to ensure that these few cases can be contained and there is no extension within the community that can challenge the health services. And the national authorities have taken decision to increase social distancing, including reducing public gathering and also big events that involve many people crowded in a single place. Restaurants, bars have been also closed. Now here we also covered 47 African countries, and our main concern is now that we start having local transmission. There are few countries that we just mentioned, including Senegal, that are strengthening the measures at least to control the spread of the disease.
And what's your sense about what the best approach is? Because you do see so many different tactics adopted by different governments. Some are shutting down airspace, some are closing borders, some are shutting schools, banning big gatherings, as you just mentioned. Is there an approach that you would recommend to policy leaders around the continent?
The main approach is based on risk assessment in each of the countries. And actually, the initial risk was the importation of cases. So it's where decision should be made in terms of proper screening and mainly follow-up on people coming from high local transmission areas. And in addition to that is how then to stop or slow the transmission within a country when the disease has been introduced, mainly ensuring social distancing and providing increasing awareness of the population for preventive measures. So this is where the emphasis should be. And the other step is also looking at what is happening in Europe, is to start working on a worse case scenario that is widespread within the community. So how to ensure that we have capacity to reduce mortality in terms of treatment capacity, equipment, and others. So this is actually what we are advising countries is to ensure that they scale up the containment measures, including having more people trained to deal with the issue, and they have a stronger approach around a given case, at the same time working on the mitigation phase.
All right, Dr. Michel Yao, Program Manager for Emergency Response for the World Health Organization in Africa.
Yesterday we brought you an interview with the Foreign Minister of Yemen's Houthi administration, who said that his forces would not shoot at fighters of the ousted government if they were not shot at themselves. This month, Yemen's devastating war is 5 years old, and a new upsurge in fighting threatens to derail what had been a fragile hope for peace. You may recall that in March of 2015, a Saudi-led coalition supported by the West unleashed a campaign to back Yemen's ousted government against Houthi rebels that are aligned to Iran.
Today we hear from the Foreign Minister for the ousted government, Mohammed Abdallah al-Hajrami, whose de facto seat of power for the moment is the southern city of Aden. He spoke to our chief international correspondent, Lise Tissot.
Now I'm at an international conference outside Yemen, and it's to this kind of a place that the foreign minister of what's called the internationally recognized government of Yemen is invited. So I'm here to meet Mohammed Abdallah al-Hajrami to find out what he has to say to the foreign minister in Sana'a. What I heard from the foreign minister of the Houthi authorities in Sana'a, he said we're not going to, their view is we're not going to shoot at you unless you shoot at us.
Well, I mean, this is just primitive way of saying it. Who actually elected them to speak on behalf of Yemenis? They just have their slogans and nice statements as if they really represent Yemenis. Well, I'm from Sana'a. My family's in Sana'a. They don't represent us. I'm a Zaidi. They don't represent all Zaidiya. And they have to understand they will not be able to keep it up. And Yemenis are suffering.
As you know, in January, there was talk of the quietest period in the war. It's now been shattered by fighting, by a shooting war. How hard is it going to be to get back to the relative calm?
It is really unfortunate because we made peace, in Sweden. We had the agreement done, and we thought that we're going in the right direction.
More than a year ago.
Yes, it's never really moved, unfortunately. The Houthis are treating that treatment as just basically a ceasefire in some place, so they could start fires in other places.
But of course, both sides accuse the other of aggression. Both sides say they're taking defensive action. But what has to be the next step to bring some calm?
I agree with you. The wrong question is to say who started it in Nehem, which was escalation. But we know the Houthis did. They did the escalations, and I think they're just doing it to just get more cause before we meet for next round of negotiations.
But you think this can lead to a process whereby the shooting war can stop and you start talking about a future for Yemen?
The international community is key, and we appreciate the concern. We know the genuine interest and genuine intentions of our international partners, all of them in the Security Council, that they need to see this disaster ends. We need to end it now. But I'm just saying we need to do it the right way. I don't want to go to the Houthis because the international community just wants a nice, fancy report in the next Security Council. That's not going to save Yemenis. That's not going to be good for me.
But this doesn't sound like you represent a government which can possibly make a deal with them.
No, the Houthis are Yemenis that went rogue, They're Yemenis. They're part of the national dialogue. They can't, the Houthis just, take the guns, pointing at us and expect us to say nothing and expect us to actually concede and just flow with whatever their wishes. They have to know that Yemen is for all Yemenis, including the Houthis. We don't want to eradicate them from the face of the earth. We just want to have, a peaceful resolutions with the Houthis.
This war has been devastating for Yemen, and one of the many terrible things about it is the bombardment by the Saudi-led coalition. It has resumed again. The United Nations condemned what it called the terrible strikes, which killed yet again civilians, including children. Does this make you uncomfortable? This is the coalition backing you.
Yeah, look, we don't condone killing of civilians. Of course not. It's a big campaign, and mistakes happen. And we have this.
They happen a lot.
Well, we have this giant, which is the Joint Inspection Team. They covered over 170 claims already, and if you look back at the statements, they have acknowledged some 30-something mistakes that happen in war. So there's a process, and it's changing. It's not always perfection.
Would you call for an end to the bombardment?
We would call the end of the war. We need to end it, but sometimes we need military pressure.
What kind of a future do you see for Yemen? There are those who fear that Yemen could be two countries again?
Well, Yemen is really rich. We've been there. And I'm not just talking oil. We have industries, fisheries, minerals. We have even, we could be, if we have good governance and stability, one of the really leading, countries in the region. And it's really a pity that we're not there. And we can't even provide for our people. We just need stability and peace. And let the people decide what is the future of Yemen.
How's the Foreign Minister for the ousted Yemeni government, Mohammed Abdullah al-Hadrami, speaking to our chief international correspondent, Lisa Seth.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa announced a 21-day lockdown that will be imposed from midnight on Thursday. The country is the worst affected in sub-Saharan Africa, and we're now joined by Marian Martin, who is a journalist with the Daily Maverick newspaper. Good to have you on. First of all, Marian, what exactly did Mr. Ramaphosa say?
He announced the lockdown of 21 days, and because it was phrased within ensuring that there won't be a health emergency, so we needed swift and extraordinary action to prevent human catastrophes of enormous proportions, is how the president put it. And the lockdown was then announced as a decisive measure, quote unquote, to save millions of South Africans from infection and to save the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. It's come on the back of what's been an escalation for us here in South Africa. When the president first addressed the nation on the 15th of March, we had 61 confirmed cases. 8 days later, last night, we had 402 cases. So I think that underlines a lot of the measures.
And what's the reaction to his speech in the course of your work? What have you heard people saying?
Support. That's the one word, support. It doesn't matter whether you are opposition political parties, the DA, the ESS, the Freedom Front Plus. Support. It doesn't matter if it's trade unions, whether it's COSATU or SAFTU or anyone, support, and also a lot of support from civil society, and that in a country like South Africa, where very often we're quite fractious and vocal and robust, is quite amazing, and it comes at a unique time.
What about small businesses? Are they happy with the measures?
I don't think there are, but quite frankly, as Cyril Ramaphosa put it, it could be worse if we don't take any action. Look, there are some measures that were announced to try and cushion. So there's the Rupert and the Oppenheimer family donated 1 billion rand each. There is a solidarity fund which government is starting with 150 million rand and is expecting, and anybody can donate to that. The banks, an exemption was announced. We've got fairly strict anti-collusion, anti-collusion legislation. Right. So an exemption was announced last night to those competitive measures so that the banks can sit down together and say, how do we face this? What can we put on the table?
And for those who don't know what R1 billion is in dollars, it's about $56 million that was donated by those two families. But do you think enough is being done, though, to make sure that the economy survives? Because we know that the South African economy has really struggled for a long time.
Absolutely, and that is going to be the test case. The measures are there. They are not excessive. They are not. They're not that deep. We don't have the deep pockets to dig into. And I think the appeal last night by Ramaphosa was that, please, everybody pull together. So, for example, if you have a domestic worker, if you have somebody who works within your house, continue to pay those people. That was the same appeal to big businesses. Please continue to pay. This is an extraordinary moment in our history. Let's all stand together.
Marian, we're going to have to leave it there. We could obviously continue this conversation for a lot longer, but unfortunately we can't. Marian Martin, a journalist with the Daily Maverick newspaper in South Africa.
Today's Day from the BBC World Service with Alan Kasuja and James Copnell. With the sports.
It summons me. Like a genie from a lamp, here I come.
Okay, get in there.
Well, I can't grant you any wishes, I'm afraid, this morning. However, in half an hour's time, I can grant you the name of the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year award. Of course, we had 5 candidates. We've had a record number of votes. The 5-woman shortlist was England's Lucy Bronze, Australia's Sam Kerr, Netherlands' Viviane Miedema, and the American duo of Julie Ertz and Megan Rapinoe. Just 30 minutes now to wait. On the subject of women's football, the European Champions League final has unsurprisingly been postponed now, as has the Men's Champions League final and Europa League final. Here's our football correspondent, John Murray.
This is purely confirmation from UEFA that the showpiece finals of European football will not now take place on their original dates in May. Last week, UEFA put all matches on hold until further notice, and this is the first statement from the working group set up to find solutions for the completion of the current season. The Men's Champions League final was due to take place in Istanbul, the women's in Vienna, and the Europa League final in Gdansk. UEFA indicated last week they will do all they can for the matches to eventually be played in those venues, but say as yet no decision has been made on rearranged dates.
And European football's governing body also looking at the idea of a mini tournament to conclude this year's competitions, which was shut down at the quarter-final stage. To Africa, where 2 Nigerian footballers, Deo Ojo of Enyimba and Abia Comets Benjamin Uliamade, have been
kidnapped while driving on the Benin-Owo Expressway in Nigeria. The pair were on a break as the Nigerian league is currently suspended because of coronavirus. Ojo's Nyimba teammate Emmanuel James was also in their car, but he managed to escape. The club says it's keeping in close contact with Ojo's family and efforts are already in place to ensure the player's release. Now to the Olympics, where a long-serving member of the International Olympic Committee has told an American newspaper he believes the Games will be postponed by a year. Dick Pound is quoted in USA Today as saying, on the basis of the information the IOC has, postponement has been decided. The parameters going forward have not been determined, but the Games are not going to start on July the 24th. That much I know. Well, all this, of course, after on Monday, Australia joined Canada in saying it wouldn't be sending its athletes to the Games if they were to go ahead as scheduled. Canadian sprinter Andre de Grasse, who took 3 medals home from the Rio Games, told the BBC that he and other athletes would love a postponement for the chance to compete.
It's tough. It's really, really tough because it's their livelihood. It's what they do every single day. It's how they make a living. It's something that they love to do. It's their passion. It's their job. And for something just to be taken away from these athletes, it's really heartbreaking. I'm in my prime, and I'm hoping that somehow the Olympics goes on and we're in it, even if it has to get kind of postponed.
And Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will be speaking on a phone conference with the head of the International Olympic Committee, Thomas Bach, in a few hours' time. Sir Ross, thank you very much indeed. Now, on Monday, it was reported that Harvey Weinstein, the former Hollywood producer and convicted sex offender, now facing 23 years in prison, has tested positive for the coronavirus. He's currently being held in a correction facility near Buffalo in upstate New York, where 2 prisoners tested positive for the virus on Sunday. Before that, he was in Rikers Island, a jail in New York City, where there are now 38 cases of coronavirus.
Well, some prisoners are expected to walk out of prison from this Tuesday in New Jersey. The Chief Justice there announced on Sunday that up to 1,000 inmates will be released to reduce the high risk of contamination in prison. According to the New York Times, no other state has taken such sweeping action, but the other cities, including New York, Cleveland, Tulsa, and Oklahoma, have moved to release sick or vulnerable detainees. I spoke to a former inmate and now advocate of prison reform, Vidal Guzman, in New York City, and he gave me an idea of the conditions on Rikers Island.
It's horrible. Rikers Island is built on trash. So when it rains, the trash from Rikers actually goes next to beaches and stuff like that. People can smell it close to their homes. When you're getting in there, the correctional officers don't even drink the water. When you talk about rats and roaches, oh my God, beyond disgusting.
So you're basically describing a cesspit of illness, a place for disease and bacteria. Tell me about the living arrangements in Rikers.
So you have dormitories, individuals who are no cells, but you can keep someone in the dorm for 30 to 40, 50 people. So there's 2 different type of places where people can actually, live at. And I was in both places. So basically, if someone's sick in the dormitory, that means you're probably going to get sick. If someone's sick in a cell, maybe you can get sick because you're going to be with everyone in the day room.
And now we've heard that New Jersey will release as many as 1,000 people from its jails. And President Trump has also said that some nonviolent prisoners could be released. What do you think about that?
Iran released 45,000 for now people that they had incarcerated. In New York City, they released around 20-something people. We know how the coronavirus is, and we know how impacted people are. We know how bad it can really get. And even when I was on Rikers, they're just not prepared. For me, I'm in a level where, as much people need to be released.
From what you're saying, I sense you feel like they could do a lot more.
These are human beings. And I think another part about it is, if we're talking about Rikers Island, majority of some people in there are still awaiting trial. Even if they get sentenced and sent somewhere else, that doesn't mean that that person's supposed to suffer because of the coronavirus. Let me tell you something. I've been in facilities where you're talking about 6 feet away from each other, that is non-existing in facilities, especially like Rikers Island and other places. I knew this was going to happen. Like, the coronavirus is going to hit our facilities, especially prisons and jail, the most hard.
You suspect it will get worse? You suspect that this is just the beginning?
Oh, yes. And the only thing about it is, like, we're putting spotlights on L.A., New York, Washington, but imagine the facilities in down south.
Okay, so what is the recommendation to control the coronavirus in the jail system in the U.S.?
I think the most important part is people who are violated for parole and probation, they need to stop that. A small percentage of it is people who did crime, and the largest percentage are people missing curfew or felony drug tests. And that is the growing population in America, the parole and probation system. So that should start first, right?
Vidal Guzman.
Now, a positive story for you amid the doom and gloom of coronavirus. The Canadian playwright Nick Green has just launched the Social Distancing Festival to showcase online arts and music projects that have been cancelled because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The website, socialdistancingfestival.com, has received hundreds of submissions from around the world. So what gave Nick Green the idea?
Me and a collaborator of mine got news that a new musical that we've been working on for about 2 years, the production of it was cancelled. And so, naturally, that was really disappointing for all of us on a lot of levels. Mostly, we've done so much work for it, and we're looking forward to it, but also that we were going from this really creative, collaborative space to going and being alone in our respective homes, trying to continue that work. So that night, I posted a little idea on social media that I would create a site where people could submit some canceled artistic projects so the world could see all their hard work. And it just kind of caught fire from there and spread all around the world.
How did it actually work?
Well, the site has a few different functions. One part of it is the festival content, which is the culmination of, I think we're at about 600 submissions now that we've gone through and curated into